at this point, eat the rich, just eat the rich.
That would be a pricey dinner. The average pay for a Canadian top 100 CEO, a record $14.3 million, or 243 times what a typical Canadian worker makes, up from $227 in 2018.
Who would have imagined that Canadians might be thinking of the idea of figuratively eating the rich? This is the extent to which the government has driven the country. Instead of ensuring economic equality, the nation is steeped in inequality. In 2023, the wealthiest individuals in Canada became significantly richer, while the incomes of the poorest half of all tax filers decreased. Is this a form of modern-day slavery? And is Canada transforming into a nation only for the elites? In fact, sadly, this Christmas might be reserved only for the wealthy, as many can't even afford a decent gift. And to make it worse, for the first time, Canadians fear that their children will inherit a financial struggle greater than their own. In today's video, we will talk about how the average Canadian is able to afford less and less over the last few years, essentially making the average Canadian poorer. See, the cost of living crisis has reached a point where many young Canadians are not just voicing their concerns, but are driven to despair, with some tragically resorting to suicide. Mental health issues are on the rise, exacerbated by the harsh reality that the average Canadian can afford less and less each passing year. Hopelessness pervades, leading to a surge in depression and related struggles. Even basic necessities like affordable housing now seem like a luxury reserved for the elite. Depression and sadness permeate the air everywhere one turns. Students find it increasingly challenging to afford a decent education. Healthcare costs are skyrocketing, rents are reaching unprecedented heights, and a visit to the stores reveals shockingly high price tags on basic commodities. The outlook for the average Canadian is growing dimmer, creating a sense of despair and hardship. But a few decades ago, this wasn't the case. Canada, the land of growth, experienced remarkable times when economic equality prevailed, and everyone could afford a decent standard of living. In the post-World War II era, Canada underwent a phase of rapid economic growth, marked by industrialization, urbanization, and the discovery of new natural resources. Technological advancements and expanded trade further fueled this growth, resulting in increased incomes and a significantly improved standard of living for Canadians. During the 1990s and even during the Cold War era, Canadians led respectable lives. While not technologically advanced by today's standards, the government provided basic necessities and took care of its citizens. However, the landscape began to shift with the 2008 global crisis, where Canada fared relatively well compared to the United States. Unfortunately, due to certain decisions, Canada's open invitation for immigration overwhelmed the system and contributed to a cost of living crisis. The situation was further compounded by the COVID-19 pandemic, revealing the government's incompetence and the flaws in its policies. Speaking of the pandemic, as COVID-19 unfolded, the Canadian government rolled out the unprecedented monetary and fiscal policies to address the economic crisis. The Bank of Canada took aggressive measures, lowering interest rates nearly to zero and significantly expanding its balance sheet. While these extensive measures, combined with societal adjustments to remote work and social distancing, facilitated a rapid economic recovery, challenges persisted for client-facing industries. Despite the economic rebound, the prolonged stimulus inadvertently led to inflation, surpassing supply with heightened demand. In the spring of 2021, inflation surged to an 8.1% high, the highest in 39 years. Responding to this, the Bank of Canada scaled back quantitative easing and notably increased its policy interest rate from 0.25% to 4.50% in 2022. Simultaneously, the federal government incurred substantial deficits amounting to $330 billion in fiscal year 2020 to 21, persisting with deficits of $90 billion in 2021 to 22 and $43 billion in 2022 to 23, surpassing pre-pandemic levels. Former Finance Minister Bill Morneau criticized the government for excessive spending, citing a lack of fiscal restraint. Throughout the pandemic, the government justified its spending by pointing to low interest rates, emphasizing affordability, and underscoring the need to invest in Canada's future. Even with the end of low interest rates in 2022, federal spending remained elevated. Certain certainly, when economic affairs are mishandled due to incompetence, the consequences become unbearable for the average individual. Inflation persists, causing individuals who used to purchase, for instance, 5 loaves of bread to now settle for 2 or 3, extending to various other essential commodities. Given the widening wealth gap, many lower-income Canadians can't even entertain the thought of luxury items, which now seem like a rare indulgence, perhaps accessible only once or twice a year. Adding to the burdens are taxes, a topic Canadians dread. There's a looming concern that Canadians could be paying more taxes than their American counterparts, with seemingly little to show for it but income inequality and exploitation. Purchasing a house has become an elusive dream for many Canadians, all thanks to exploding housing prices. Many people who don't earn a lot of money find it impossible to buy or even rent a home. It's even tougher for those who make a modest income. They end up having to leave their neighborhoods and become poor. The cost of a regular home in Canada has gone up substantially, more than 70% in just 5 years. In big cities like Vancouver and Toronto, a regular home costs more than $1 million. Renting a small apartment in Canada costs about $1,800 every month, but in places like Vancouver and Toronto, it's even more, over $2,000 per month for a small apartment. More than 500,000 Canadians are stuck living in homes that cost too much. This makes life especially difficult for them and has quickly made more and more Canadians poorer over time. As the cost of housing has rapidly outpaced the increase in wages, housing demands a greater share of Canadians' monthly income, making many of them poorer. This problem has become so bad that some Canadians can't even afford 3 square meals a day just to make sure they can pay their rent or mortgage. Another contributing factor to this crisis is the government's inability to effectively manage zoning regulations. These regulations, designed to govern land use in specific areas, often aim to shield neighborhoods from undesired developments like commercial or industrial activities. However, they inadvertently limit the housing supply, leading to escalating prices. In several Canadian cities, zoning regulations have specifically hindered the growth of multifamily housing, such as apartments and condos. This restriction exacerbates the shortage of affordable housing options, as these types of units are typically more budget-friendly than single-family homes. Rising food prices are also making Canadians poorer. It's especially tough for those who make an average amount of money. They have to pick between buying food and other important things they need. Almost half of Canadians, 43%, say that the prices of food worry them the most when it comes to money. 1 out of 5 Canadians, 20%, might need to get food from community groups in the next 6 months because food has become so unaffordable. In 2023, the cost of food for Canadian families is expected to go up by $1,100. It's just really sad, and it feels like nobody is listening to the problems people are facing. For the wealthy, this is just a drop in the bucket, but for many, this increase in food prices is backbreaking. The Canadian government's decision about food prices and competition are also making the gap between rich and poor even worse. First, they control the supply of dairy, poultry, and eggs, making them more expensive. This hurts low-income families the most because they spend a big part of their money on food. Second, the government isn't doing enough to make sure grocery stores compete with each other. Only a few big chains control everything so they can charge high prices for food. Again, this hits people with less money the hardest. Yet the feelings of low-income Canadians seem to be ignored, as the government appears out of touch with the deep impact of becoming poorer on their lives. A drop in the standard of living becomes an unavoidable reality for Canadians facing financial hardship, hindering dreams of securing a better home or achieving an upgrade. Unfortunately, under the current government, the prevailing option seems to be a downgrade, with homelessness emerging as an increasing concern in Canada. Disturbingly, approximately 235,000 Canadians struggle with homelessness annually, enduring various weather conditions while the rich continue to indulge in luxuries within their villas and palaces. Adding to the distress, poverty continues to rise across Canada, with 1 in 5 single adults living in poor conditions. If corrective measures are not taken, this figure may further increase. Alarmingly, nearly 1 million working-age single adults find themselves stuck in a cycle of deep poverty, with an average income of less than $12,000, less than half of the $25,000 low-income threshold for a single adult household. The concerning question arises: how often does the government discuss the difficulties of the poor, engaging in debates about poverty and income inequality? Is this the Canada everybody remembers? To say the least, it is shocking. And on top of that, for the first time in Canada's history, people are not eagerly looking forward to the upcoming holidays. December, usually a month of joy, especially with Christmas, doesn't hold the same excitement for most Canadians anymore. more. The welfare crisis in Canada is getting worse, with 1 in 4 Canadians relying on welfare, and young adults are feeling the impact the most. The increasing use of food banks points to a troubling trend. Unfortunately, many folks find themselves unable to join in Christmas gift exchanges this year, facing financial challenges that may confine them to their overpriced rental apartments, perhaps sharing a simple meal with friends. It's the first time in many years that Canadians can't afford to buy anything for their children during Christmas. It has taken Trudeau and Freeland 8 years to mess everything up. Moreover, there's the issue of the massive influx of about 500,000 migrants each year. They enter and put a lot of pressure on the entire system, further increasing the burden on healthcare and food costs. It's straightforward. When there's a greater number of people demanding the same amount of goods and services, such as food, housing, and healthcare, it causes inflation, making everything more expensive and Canadians poorer. This is why importing too many immigrants negatively impacts the locals. Not only are immigrants unintentionally causing inflation, they also inadvertently suppress wages. Local Canadians are having a hard time securing jobs with good pay because immigrants are willing to do the same job for lower wages. This circumstance is causing Canadians to feel trapped. Their incomes aren't increasing, leading due to issues such as financial struggles and a sense of discouragement and various other economic difficulties. The unfortunate truth is that regular Canadians can buy less and less each year, making them poorer. Everything costs more now. Living expenses are too high, homes are too expensive, and prices keep going up. Even holidays feel like regular days. As a result, everyday Canadians are struggling with poverty and homelessness. The reason is pretty straightforward. The government's policies over the past 6 to 8 years have been poor, and now everything is falling apart. If you like this video and want to learn more about the crippling cost of the Canadian food price crisis, check out this video here. And if this video brought value to you, please consider liking, subscribing, and sharing the video. Thanks for watching.